All right, welcome. I am Liz Williams. I am the founder of Awe Partners, a social impact advisory firm that is focused on lifting up women and children around the globe. And in celebration of Women's History Month, we are hosting a week of interviews with women who are dedicated to making a difference in the world and making the world a better place. And today I am honored and excited to introduce you to Cindy Jones-Nyland, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of To The Market. Welcome, Cindy.
Thanks, Liz. I'm so excited to be here. It's such a great week.
Thank you. I'm so happy you're with us as well. So Cindy is, as I said, the Chief Marketing Officer of To The Market, which is a company that connects brands, corporations, and retailers to ethically made products from around the world, including the United States. Cindy brings more than 20 years of professional experience in both public and private organizations. She's previously served as the Chief Marketing Officer and Executive Vice President of Marketing and Resource Development for Heifer International, a global nonprofit focused on poverty alleviation and community development. Prior to joining Heifer, Cindy served as CMO to an early stage media company and helped set the foundation for growth and B Corp certified status. She also led digital marketing and brand for several years at the national headquarters for Susan G. Komen for the Cure. She spent the first part of her career in technology and telecommunications and was involved in several key merger and acquisition activities that led to transactions. Cindy sits on the Grow Fund Advisory Board and Bridgespan CMO Brain Trust. Awesome. So I want to start with where kind of To The Market has come from, because it was founded by a friend and colleague, Jane Mosbacher Morris, and initially the focus was on bringing artisan products to a market around the world. And that, although that was incredibly impactful, you've even shifted the focus more. And so could you just tell us a little bit about that journey and what the focus of the organization is now?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Liz, for the great opportunity. To The Market, as the name implies, was initially started as a direct-to-consumer company bringing beautiful handmade, handcrafted products from makers around the globe to consumers. And, you know, our CEO and founder spent the first part of her career in counterterrorism and at the State Department. So she did a lot of travel. And during a lot of the discussions that she was having, you know, in all parts of the globe, she was noticing that especially women-made items and maker items were not having access or didn't have access to the global supply chain. And so, you know, a light bulb went off and said, you know, hey, I think there's an opportunity for us to connect these overlooked suppliers with global market access. And the company initially started to set sail in that direction.
Right. And now there's been a shift or just an add-on, and it's incredible now, where you're really focusing on creating the sustainable supply chain solution. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes. So over the course of the last few years, we have shifted to be more B2B focused. You know, our mission is to power an ethical supply chain. Okay. And, you know, what that means to us is looking at better for people, better for planet suppliers that sit outside of the traditional supply chain ecosystem and make those suppliers available to big brands, retailers, and corporations. You know, our goal really is to disrupt the traditional supply chain and make these beautiful products, whether it's apparel or home goods or accessories, available both at small scale with some of our smaller artisans to, you know, larger batch factories, so that, you know, we're competing with the likes of the large traditional supply chain manufacturing solutions.
It's incredible. Obviously there's a demand for that. You're finding that from these retailers, for example, that this is something that they really want to have available to them. That's right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Liz. I think we're finding that, you know, I think in general, the world is shifting. You know, consumers are demanding that transparency and authenticity in their products and understanding who made their products, where they were made, how they were made. and we're at a time when a lot of that came front and center over the course of the last year in terms of the supply chain disruption.
Right.
And, that exposed what many of us already knew. And, there's probably, the statistic probably hasn't changed much, but only about 6% of corporations have full visibility into their supply chains. So what that means is, as consumers, we may be demanding and asking, questions about where our products are made,
right.
But we're currently, the visibility in terms of what's being done now in supply chains everywhere, there's limited visibility into how those things are being done.
Meaning those corporations, the retailers, or I guess the manufacturers, do not know exactly, they cannot pinpoint exactly what's happening in their supply chain.
Correct. And we're seeing that change, right? I mean, especially in fashion, one of the big glaring, moments over the course of this last year has been looking at everything that's happened in the supply chains because of COVID, right? And the garment industry and what's happening in fashion supply chains, and asking questions. Can we be more demand driven? Can we look at supplier diversity? Can we look at ways to not only have efficiencies in our supply chain, but ensure that all the way to those that are producing anything, whether it's a t-shirt or a handbag or, a home good, ensuring that they have fair labor practices. We know how things are made. We know the materials that are being put into those products. Yeah. From the time you purchase and see it all the way down to the production line.
It's incredible. And so the way you are disrupting this, the way you are doing this, is you have access to, I guess it's over 200 or so suppliers that have been vetted by you, so that we can actually answer those questions. What's happening from start to finish? Is that right? Is that the way it's
right.
done?
Well, and one of the initial ways that To The Market was started, we built this from supplier up. So trust is really important in our business model. So we do have over 200 vetted syndicated suppliers in our supply chain, and they're from over 50 countries, including here in the US. And they all, as part of our proprietary vetting system, we ask a lot of questions related to guiding principles that go back to, fair and livable wages, workers' rights, ethically made, things that we consider a part of our DNA. But we also ask questions related to GOTS organic certification or fair trade or NEST or a myriad of things that help inform consumers and our clients who are buying, on behalf of maybe their end customer, being able to answer questions and know that what they are getting from our suppliers and our supply chain is sustainable, authentic, transparent, and they're able to know that, we've asked those questions, we have vetted them, and when we put them in front of, buyers, they have confidence that they're getting something that is real and authentic and sustainably made.
It's incredible. Do you find that you provide guidance or work with some of these suppliers that maybe are, they're doing things well, but there are even a couple of things they could do that would up level, and that's something that you can guide them on and kind of provide that knowledge to them?
Yeah, absolutely. This is so important, and I'm so glad you asked that, because that's part of building the relationships with our suppliers. Okay. In many cases, we may get questions from some of our clients about ideas and design ideas, and being able to partner with our suppliers to help understand what's trendy, what kind of tech pack look like, how do we jointly develop this so that they have the business and we're providing production opportunities for our suppliers, and also then meeting the demands of, some of the brands and retailers that we work with.
Yeah. Okay. That's incredible. So I know you said that, this trusted relationship is so important. Why is that so important, and how are you unique in creating that? Like what, how do you affect that? What happens between you and these suppliers that allows this to grow, particularly when we're talking about suppliers that we are not close. It's not always face to face.
Right. You know, I think it's interesting to the market. We get asked a lot of times, like, what's in the culture, the DNA of to the market? And I think at the center, there's a couple things. I think it's trust and network effects, right? And the ability to kind of build trust and relationships. And, you know, we started the business finding suppliers first. And so, you know, the ability to build kind of a groundswell of suppliers that we could rely on for orders, but that they could also rely on us for production volume, right? So it was this really great relationship in terms of trust and value. And, you know, that I think is so it's, in my mind, that makes it relational instead of transactional. Yes. And when you look at traditional supply chains, right, they're very transactional. And so it allows us a lot more flexibility in understanding, in communicating, and, you know, because in many cases, a lot of overlooked suppliers are, you know, they don't have the same infrastructure. They don't have the same ability to get access to information. So, you know, having a partner that helps navigate that, right, and amplify their work is so important.
Right, right. Incredible. I know there are other benefits to your having these type of relationships where it can be, you know, we're not talking necessarily about mass produced items. And so that allows for things to be even more unique and for you to provide something different to your retailers, your buyers. How does that work?
So, you know, we can scale all the way from, you know, small batch makers that are very unique and handcrafted to, you know, women-owned and operated factories that can do larger production volumes in places like Bangladesh. So the spectrum is wide. I think what we found, and what I've found to be interesting over the course of this last year, is people are really paying attention to the uniqueness or the specialness of things. And so this idea of kind of the creative manufacturing or handmade sector is kind of getting its attention. It's in a way, you know, people are turning to, mass production isn't as attractive, right? So it's how can I get something unique that I can still do in big volumes, but that aligns more with my values than just a widget or a t-shirt that doesn't have any story or any traceability or storytelling attached.
So you can actually then, for someone, a client that you're working with, you can share that story, and Absolutely. That can become part of their marketing when they're going out to their clients.
Absolutely. And it's it's something we talk about a lot. In fact, one of the, you know, we're in the middle of building a tech platform that is taking all the learnings from how we built out our supplier network and the vetting and all the knowledge that we've developed, but it's also building in algorithms and information on how to quantify that impact for our clients.
Okay.
So imagine, you know, and we do this now manually. We have lots of ways to actually quantify social impact of your purchase orders. And we have several clients that we do that for, and then they extend that either to their employees or as part of their corporate social responsibility goals and guidelines, or even onto their consumers. So we can find that in things like a report, right? Or we also find opportunities to tell that story in some of the tagging of our products that then allows the actual consumer to see it real time immediately as they're picking that up off the rack or off a shelf.
Are there certain things that are of most interest when you talk about impact and what can be measured? Are there a couple key areas that whether it's the client or the retailers are really looking for?
So ethically made, I think women, made by women is really important.
Okay.
Sustainably sourced or responsibly sourced, GOTS organic, fair trade. Okay. So those are just some places to start in terms of, you know, we talk a lot about the farm to table movement. You know, it showed kind of the line from, you know, where your food comes from all the way to the table, and people like Starbucks and others kind of paved the way for understanding that supply chain. So now we're looking at factory to front door, right?
I love that, yeah.
And understanding kind of where it comes from and all the way through to, you know, when you put your t-shirt on your body.
Right. I love that. I do want to, I know there are clients of yours that are named organizations that many of us would know. And so could you just give us an example of a couple that we would be familiar with and kind of the relationship that's developed with them?
Sure. I'll give you several.
Okay.
And in all of these cases, the products range from, co-branded merchandise, private label, home goods, accessories, apparel, etc.
Okay.
Target, Nordstrom's, FabFitFun. We have a really great relationship with Bloomingdale's. We were involved they do carousels every quarter. And they did a Lion King carousel a few years ago. And we helped source all of the parts of that carousel from our makers in different parts of Africa. And that was a really special moment because then we were able also to tell the impact story of what that meant for that carousel installment. So those are a few examples. This past year, we've also had clients in the hospital and institution space, given some of the activity related to PPE.
Okay, so right, when COVID hit, you were able to pivot. Because of the way you're structured, you were able to pivot pretty quickly. Can you tell us about how you did that and what that looked like, what the process was and the result?
Yeah, I can't even believe it's been a year. I was thinking about our discussion today and it's been a year.
Yeah.
And so about a year ago, we, like everyone, the world was shutting down. And, to your point about our network and our suppliers, we had built such strong relationships with them that one of the things we decided to do was just go out and with, an RFP and with lots of phone calls and emails and say, is there any way that we could retrofit production and figure out how we could source PPE?
Yeah.
And we had a flood of responses. So, we had a couple of webinars with our makers, figured out how to go to market really quickly. In some cases, we had to develop some tech packs and then turned around. And this is, I think, when networking effects kicks in. We were talking to neighbors or friends or contacts in hospitals, trying to figure out how we could help. And that kind of started a snowball of how we were able to get PPE in the hands of people and keep some of our suppliers working, because in many cases orders were being canceled and all sorts of things were starting to have an effect on their livelihoods.
How were you involved in keeping them safe if they were still going to be coming to the factories doing the manufacturing? How did that work in terms of trying to keep everybody safe?
We had to rely on local mandates. And so in many cases, supplier diversity helped us here.
Yeah.
Because in certain parts of the world, when, let's say, India and Bangladesh, people couldn't come to work,
right,
we leaned on, a maker in Ghana. We had a lot, it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But because of supplier diversity, we were able to shift something. In fact, one order in particular for masks, I think we sourced from 7 different makers in 5 countries.
Wow.
I think those numbers are right because, to your point, everyone had to stay safe. And so, factories couldn't operate if the numbers were at a certain, percentage. The other thing that everybody faced is once we kind of got into it, then we faced a lot of logistics and shipping challenges.
Right. Right. So you guys haven't slept much, I'm guessing.
It was an interesting year, but we were, I think Jane, or we were quoted in an article once about the ROI being a measure and not looking at it as ROI as much of the cost of inaction. And had we not done that, what the consequences of that might have not been so great.
What hits me as you're describing this and how you worked through this is the community that you've built between suppliers that aren't necessarily, they're not with the same company, for example, and yet
right,
they stepped up for each other in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
When one country wasn't able to meet the demand, another stepped in. And I'm just getting this vision of this beautiful community that's working together to lift all of us up, to lift everyone up.
Absolutely, yes. And we saw that, we definitely saw that come together in our syndicated supplier network this past year.
Yeah.
And, for there, given that it's International Women's Day week,
Yep.
I'll give it a whole week, many of them are women.
Yeah.
And so, as we think about, the changes, especially in the supply chain, how important it is to give voice to women makers.
Yeah, I mean, that is really, I think you've said your bigger mission. It isn't, I mean, you are really focused on women's economic empowerment.
Absolutely. Yes.
Describe that for me, Cindy.
The majority of garment workers are women. The majority of consumers are women. And this is, the handmade craft sector is the second largest only to agriculture around the globe.
Wow, I did not know that.
It's second to agriculture.
Wow.
And yet, factory owners, investors, bosses, leaders, the majority of those positions are still held by men, when the garment workers and the consumers, are mainly women. And so I think we see this as a really great opportunity to figure out how to create a community where everyone's lifting each other up and amplifying good work. I think economic empowerment and the dignity of work is at the center of what we stand for. Yeah. And so being able to do that in, a purchase order at a time is that's how we hope to change retail manufacturing.
It's incredible. It is incredibly inspiring and beautiful. And I'm so honored to be having this conversation with you to learn more about this. It's just magnificent. The other thing I'm curious about, just as you're talking about it, you said you do webinars. Do you bring together the different suppliers at times, like if you're doing something educational, and so that they actually do have now with Zoom assuming they have access to it, that you bring them together and they actually do get to interface with each other from different parts of the world?
So we have tried to do that on a couple of just this past year. Okay. Prior to that, no, other than just communicate, like actual written communications where they share information. But we also have added a couple of people that are completely and solely laser focused on our suppliers. And I, just before this call, actually reviewed a newsletter that's going to go out to all of our makers. Yeah. And it's the beginning, I think, of an ongoing communication structure so that we can do that on a regular basis with our suppliers. Because to your point, learning from each other globally, I think could be really valuable.
Oh, I agree. And I just think knowing that, again, that feeling of being in this together is so powerful.
Yeah, I totally agree.
The other thing, I know that in certain circumstances you are able, prior to COVID, you are able to take your buyers or your retailers to actually visit the suppliers. Is that something that happens frequently, or how does that kind of work?
So we have done that in the past, and the Bloomingdale's is a great example. Okay. So, and that's been now several years ago, and I anticipate hopefully we'll get to do that again. Yeah. But we part of that sourcing visit was because of the level of importance it was for the team at Bloomingdale's to know the makers, to interact with the suppliers, and so we have done that, and I hope we continue to do that because again, that's another example of bringing everyone closer together.
Yeah, and that really, really understanding the story behind it, right, which is just so impactful. I want to touch on the organization. To the Market is a for-profit,
correct,
woman-founded, woman-led organization, which I love. And so, to that end, you have done fundraising in the past and looked for investors and stuff. Right. Is that something? Are you at that point? How does that work? In thinking about how we can support you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. And, because of our mission and vision, to your point, we do sometimes get labeled a nonprofit. We are not. We are a for-profit startup, and we are in our second round of fundraising and, actively looking at investors who are interested in changing retail. Okay,
wonderful. So in terms of getting in contact with you, directly to you or going through the website tothemarket.com? If somebody wanted to learn more and see how they might be able to support you, what would you
I'm going to go ahead and just give my email address.
Okay.
It's cindy@tothemarket.com.
Perfect.
And this is an area we're super excited about. So, investors are critical, and we welcome any and all that are interested in changing, manufacturing and sourcing for good.
Fantastic. I love it. I love it. I love to end our conversations with this question.
Okay.
In these challenging and uncertain times, what is it that brings you hope? I think just being part of To the Market probably gives you hope all the time, but I'm just curious.
Gosh, wow. I'm an optimist by nature, so it's in my DNA. So, but I think one of the things that gives me hope, as I look at this past year, I'm a big believer that constraints and chaos sometimes create the biggest area of opportunity and biggest reasons for change. And I believe we're seeing consumers make different purchasing decisions based on aligning their purchasing power with their values.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to start seeing more of that because, that's our personal way to be able to create change. So I'm very passionate about women-owned and operated businesses. So, when I'm out searching for whether it's a product or a service, I'm inclined to reach for those that fit in women-owned and operated. And so I think we're starting to see people really leverage their purchasing power in ways that will create change. And big, broad change starts with consumers, making decisions that force large-scale adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And that's, our focus at Awe Partners is on how can you shop, invest, and give. We now have we call it the power of the purse, hashtag power of the purse. It's such an ability. Women are coming into a tremendous amount of wealth, both through what they're earning and what they're inheriting over the next couple of decades. And so they have this ability now to give, shop, and invest for purpose, and they're doing it. And I think the easier we make it for them, the more it will happen. And so, I love that. And I guess I would like to just ask, so if somebody goes to Bloomingdale's and they're shopping there, how do they know? You said there's tags at time that show that this is an ethically sourced, and maybe even To the Market is this,
Right.
is the supply chain there. How do they find that? I mean, is that available?
It is in most cases, and Bloomingdale's is a great example. They do a great job in terms of the product lines they carry. So, in many cases, it shows up on the tags, whether it's GOTS organic cotton, or, To the Market, or fair trade, or responsibly sourced. So a lot of those things are showing up on tags. And, retailers like Bloomingdale's are being really progressive about, putting products on shelves and in their store that are reflective of their values.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I cannot thank you enough. I am so excited to have connected with you and to learn more about this. I will be staying in touch with you to see where you go, and hopefully maybe we'll come back again and have a conversation to see how else we can continue to support you. So thank you.
That would be great. This has been a great chat, so I appreciate it, Liz.
Thank you, and send my love and a hug to Jane as well.
I will.
And again, thank you so much. And so for everyone else, we will be continuing our conversation tomorrow. We have a circle of women healers who are going to tell us about their aspirations for healing the world. And until then, as always, be bold, be daring, be audacious, and I will see you soon. Much love.